Amartya Sen's The Idea of Justice, 2009, represents a transformative intervention in modern political philosophy and social theory. Unlike traditional approaches that focus on designing perfectly just institutions or societies, Sen emphasizes the practical assessment of justice in the real world, arguing for comparative evaluations that address the deprivations and injustices people actually experience. The book can be seen as a direct response to and critique of the dominant Rawlsian framework of justice, which relies on hypothetical ideal institutions and principles derived from the original position and the veil of ignorance. Sen's work shifts the philosophical focus from ideal theory toward what he terms realization-focused comparisons, a pragmatic orientation that engages with the lived experiences of individuals and the institutional frameworks that affect their freedoms and capabilities. At the core of Sen's argument is the distinction between transcendental institutionalism and realization-focused comparative assessment. Transcendental institutionalism, exemplified by John Rawls, a theory of justice, seeks to define perfectly just social arrangements and then evaluates actual societies against this ideal. Sen critiques this as overly abstract, morally constraining, and disconnected from the urgent realities of social deprivation. While acknowledging the intellectual achievements of Rawls and others, Sen argues that the preoccupation with ideal institutions can obscure the task of addressing tangible injustices. Instead, he proposes that we should compare actual societies, identify injustices, and take practical steps to reduce them, without waiting for the creation of an ideal institutional framework. This pragmatic orientation makes the idea of justice particularly relevant for policymakers, development theorists, and human rights activists, as it bridges philosophical reflection and real-world social action. Sen's conception of justice is deeply informed by his capability approach, developed over decades of work in welfare economics and social choice theory. The capability approach assesses human well-being not merely in terms of resources or utilities, but in terms of what people are effectively able to do and be, their substantive freedoms. Justice then is evaluated by whether individuals have the freedom to achieve valuable functionings, such as participating in political life, accessing education, pursuing meaningful work, or engaging in cultural practices. This focus on capabilities allows Sen to incorporate concerns about inequality, poverty, and social marginalization, while avoiding the reductionism of purely resource-based or utilitarian frameworks. The capability approach also emphasizes pluralism. Individuals value different things in life, and justice must recognize this diversity rather than impose a singular notion of the good. This pluralistic orientation contrasts sharply with theories that assume uniform or aggregative measures of welfare. Another significant aspect of Sen's theory is the role of public reasoning and participatory deliberation. He argues that justice cannot be understood solely through abstract principles or top-down prescriptions. It requires the active engagement of people in dialogue, debate, and collective reflection. Drawing inspiration from the philosophical traditions of Adam Smith, Adam Ferguson, and Jürgen Habermas, Sen highlights the epistemic and ethical importance of public reasoning in exposing injustices, expanding human capabilities, and informing social choices. Participatory deliberation, in Sen's view, is not only instrumentally valuable, but also intrinsically linked to human dignity. The process of engaging in reasoned discussion and moral evaluation is itself a manifestation of our capacities as autonomous, reflective beings. This commitment to deliberative democracy positions the idea of justice within broader debates in political theory about the legitimacy of decision-making, the moral authority of citizens, and the relationship between ethical reasoning and institutional design. Sen's critique of perfect justice theories extends beyond Rawls to encompass utilitarianism and other forms of consequentialist reasoning. He contends that utilitarian approaches, by focusing on aggregate welfare, can overlook distributional inequalities, fail to account for human rights, and neglect the varying capabilities of individuals. Similarly, transcendental theories of justice risk detaching philosophical reasoning from the lived experiences of those who suffer from social and economic injustices. By contrast, Sen's comparative approach does not aim to discover a single overarching principle of justice. Rather, it seeks to identify specific areas of injustice, consider the diverse perspectives of affected populations, and explore practical remedies. This approach acknowledges the complexity, contingency, and context dependence of real world justice, emphasizing both the plurality of human values and the necessity of empirical attention to societal conditions. A central methodological innovation of the idea of justice is its integration of moral philosophy and social science. Sen insists that justice cannot be understood purely as a theoretical abstraction. It requires empirical investigation into social conditions, institutional structures, and patterns of deprivation. This empirical dimension distinguishes Sen from many normative theorists and aligns his work with applied ethics, development studies, and policy analysis. For instance, in evaluating educational disparities, gender inequality, or health access, Sen's framework demands attention to measurable inequalities in functionings, rather than hypothetical redistributions based on abstract principles. The ability to translate philosophical concepts into actionable assessments makes his approach particularly valuable in international development contexts, where interventions are often evaluated in terms of tangible impacts on people's lives. While Sen's focus on comparative and realization-focused justice has been widely praised for its pragmatism and moral sensitivity, it has also generated critiques. Some scholars argue that the absence of a definitive, guiding principle may leave his theory normatively underdetermined. Without an overarching standard, critics contend it can be challenging to adjudicate between competing claims or to justify particular policy choices. Additionally, the emphasis on public reasoning presupposes that individuals have sufficient voice, education, and capacity to engage in deliberation, which may not always be the case in deeply unequal societies. Despite these criticisms, many recognize that Sen's approach represents a significant corrective to overly rigid, idealized theories of justice, highlighting the moral urgency of addressing real-world deprivation. Another important contribution of the idea of justice is its attention to global justice and international contexts. Sen extends the comparative, capability-based framework beyond national borders, examining issues such as global poverty, human rights violations, and international development. He challenges the notion that justice is merely a domestic concern, highlighting how global inequalities, trade regimes, and institutional arrangements can perpetuate deprivation across borders. This cosmopolitan orientation aligns with Sen's earlier work on famine, economic development, and social welfare, demonstrating the practical applicability of his philosophy in diverse and complex international settings. Sen also emphasizes the moral significance of democracy and freedom in his conception of justice. Political freedoms, civil rights, and participatory governance are not merely instrumental mechanisms for achieving economic well-being. They are integral components of a just society. Democratic institutions, in Sen's view, create the conditions for public reasoning, deliberation, and accountability, all of which are essential for realizing justice in practice. This integration of ethical theory and political practice reinforces the connection between normative reflection and actionable change, highlighting Sen's commitment to a justice that is both morally grounded and practically implementable. Finally, the idea of justice embodies a broader ethical pluralism that rejects monolithic conceptions of the good life. Sen's insistence on recognizing diverse values, aspirations, and capabilities reflects a profound respect for human dignity and autonomy. Justice, in his framework, is not a rigid blueprint imposed from above, but an evolving process shaped by dialogue, reflection, and comparative assessment. This pluralism makes Sen's approach especially resonant in multicultural heterogeneous societies, where different communities may hold conflicting but legitimate conceptions of well-being, success, and moral worth. In conclusion, Amartya Sen's The Idea of Justice, 2009, represents a seminal contribution to contemporary political philosophy, social theory, and development ethics. By critiquing transcendental theories of perfect justice and emphasizing comparative, realization-focused assessments, Sen reorients the discourse toward tangible human well-being, capabilities, and participatory deliberation. His integration of ethical reasoning, empirical investigation, and attention to global justice offers a framework that is simultaneously theoretically sophisticated and practically actionable. While the lack of a single guiding principle may leave some normative questions open, the book's focus on pluralism, public reasoning, and real world inequalities makes it an indispensable resource for scholars, policymakers, and anyone concerned with addressing injustice in its multiple forms. Ultimately, Sen's vision of justice is a moral and practical project. It is about making the world a better place by understanding deprivation, expanding freedoms, and creating the conditions for all individuals to lead lives they have reason to value.